Good afternoon, everyone. It's Thursday evening afternoon. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and welcome to the Ministry Media Podcast. And I am super excited to what I think is a phenomenal human being, creative, ministry creative with me on the show today. He's just, we're going to talk about the timelines in a moment because I don't know, but he's the director of a movie called The Small Groups Movie, which and it was beautiful. I was talking to Matt. It's Matt Chastain, right, Matt?
That's right. Yep.
All right. So I was reaching out to Matt, and in the email, we were talking back and forth, and he was asking me like, "Did you see the movie?" And I'm like, "Actually, I haven't seen the movie." So it helps if you see the movie. The interviews go a bit better. Yeah. So I actually did that, and I went and I got the movie, and we watched it here at home, and it was a lot of fun. Congratulations, Matt. I'm going to delve a little bit in the movie itself, but I want to go more behind the scenes, as I mentioned to you, because my audience, I think they'll benefit quite a bit of looking behind the scenes and behind the curtains of a production, producing a movie. The Kendricks back, I'm sure you know them. We know of them from Sherwood Baptist Church. They did a lot of evangelical Christian movies that were very successful. And I have a lot of respect for anybody that attempts something like this, because I think it's a mammoth task. We are, here at our ministry, we teach people to create content consistently, creating communities and collaborations. And you guys saw on the title of this podcast, I mentioned that this is probably the next level of media ministry. So I think we're going to get a lot of value from you, Matt. And I'm very excited for the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Yeah, you say it's 4 o'clock. Good evening in South Africa. It's 9 a.m. still here in the States, so I got a whole day ahead of me.
That's still early. Usually when I start this day and I work with ministries in the US, it's like 7, 8 o'clock. So that's still good.
I got to sleep in today. Yeah.
I also, for those that are, if you're listening, I just want to explain what I see. We've got the background here with the small groups, probably the marketing picture that you see everywhere. It's using that as a thumbnail. And then Matt is in a picture. He's got a beautiful black background with a blue shirt and his mic in the front. And the sound and the production quality is great. So thank you, Matt, for making an extra effort. That I can really see that you put a lot into that. And so, Matt, my first question is probably, how long ago has this, I didn't see in my research, how long ago did this movie actually launch? Like, when did you put it into the market or on media? That's the first question. The second one is, what was the time from inception, when this was a seed in your spirit, to the day that it actually opened up?
That's a long answer, so I hope you're ready for a fun ride here. So,
Matt, let's do this. I think I've got the trailer clip here. So let's play that first, so people can kind of see what we're talking about.
Sure.
And then you go ahead. Okay.
Sounds great.
Give me a second. Okay, I'm going to play it just now as we go along. Sorry about that. Get going, Mike. Matt, thank you very much.
Technical difficulties. Please stand by.
Yeah. Okay, Matt.
You can go ahead and answer the question. Okay.
You can go ahead. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. So it's kind of a long answer. So my wife and I both grew up in very small towns in Georgia. It's interesting you mentioned the Kendrick brothers. They also grew up in Georgia. In fact, they grew up at a little house that's probably 4 or 5 miles from where my family and I currently live, just south of a little town called Athens, Georgia. So I'll kind of go into kind of how they were inspirational a little later, but we started going to a church back in, I think, 2012. That's a lot bigger Baptist church than we were ever used to. And I had heard this term, small group, and they have different names: community group, connect group, life group. But the small group was kind of the original name, I guess, from back in the day. So we'd heard that term quite a bit over the years. And we both grew up in churches where, your church is the small group, Sunday school is the small group. But I think we came to find out that when you go to a larger church, more of a corporate church, the small groups become even more necessary because it's the way you find community within a church. It's very easy to go to a large church of 600, 1,200, 5,000, 10,000 people, and you can show up every day for 3 years. Then you may say hi to the same people. You may sit next to some of the same people, but it's very, very difficult to really, I think, develop community, right? And community that's what it's all about. I mean, obviously it's studying the word, but it's studying the word through community.
It's interesting you mentioned that in the movie. I just want to reference that we have this character where your main character, what's his name again?
Yeah, R. Scott Cooper, documentary filmmaker.
So Scott meets up with this one person and he sees him often, and the person can't remember him in the movie, and he keeps on saying, "Hi, my name is
Chaz."
Chaz, and he gets frustrated later on. It's like, you've seen me a couple of times, and yeah, it's interesting.
I'm so glad you brought Chaz up. He's such a minor little character in the movie, but he really was written out of kind of a frustration that I had. Actually, his character is based on a pastor at our church who every time you'd see him, he'd be like, "Hey, man," but he didn't know you are. But that's just the nature of a large corporate church.
That's correct. Yeah.
And so small groups really serve a vital role in those churches to give us community. And so my wife and I, we went to a church like that. We joined a Sunday school, started kind of getting plugged in. But we finally said, okay, we'll try a small group. And we tried a couple of small groups. And like a lot of people, your first effort at it, it's not always the best. It can be very difficult to get to a small group because it's an interesting thing because you're trying to both be intentional about a relationship with a group of people and all of a sudden become their best friends and do life together, as they say. But there has to be some kind of organic growth to that too. It has to be both. And I think in discovering that center line is where the awkwardness comes in, which we celebrate in the movie. It's okay that's awkward. But cool. Back to the story. So my wife and I, we finally kind of landed on one, and it was back in 2000. I want to say 14. It was 14. We landed on one, and I just felt like, okay, these people. It felt real. It felt authentic. There was plenty of kind of genuine and organic relationship developing, but they also were very intentional about it. And so I felt like, wow, these people really know how to small group. Now, at the time, I was the creative director and co-owner of a marketing agency, just a little boutique agency. And, I produced internet video and TV commercials. I had never really wanted to or had any desire to go into film and filmmaking, mostly because I did a TV show when I was in college with a couple of buddies, and it was very juvenile humor. I was away from the church at the time. They went off and took that show to Comedy Central and to Fox TV, and wow. I felt that I had to stay here and be a grown up and not get into that kind of toxic culture of Hollywood. And so, but when I joined a small group, so that was not my intention whatsoever to be a film director. But I was sitting there at a meeting one time. Actually, I think I was at dinner, laughing because the dude across from me made a joke that when people make jokes that are kind of borderline inappropriate, but not necessarily sinful, the character Shane in Small Group, who I play,
that's right,
is that kind of character. He's always cracking those jokes, and the guy who Shane's based on cracked a joke, and it just made me feel so comfortable with them. And I remember thinking, it felt less than it felt more genuine when people bring a more genuine version of themselves, even if it's real, even if it's raw, even if it's not necessarily polished yet. It still felt more genuine, and that's what I was looking for in kind of a worship experience. So I remember sitting at the table going, "Gosh, somebody ought to make a movie called Small Group. That would do great because there's 40 million Americans alone. I'm not to mention the rest of the world who are involved in this kind of group ministry. I just thought it would be a great environment for storytelling because of that very factor. I felt that there was a reputation, still is a reputation of Christian films for sometimes feeling too forced, too contrived, too black and white, so to speak, too sanitized. Absolutely. We try to sanitize real life to fit some kind of higher than biblical purity standard. There's a lot of stories in the Old Testament that if I were to pitch to some Christian film distributor, they would go, oh, no, we can't say that in a Christian movie. Really? Because it's in the Old Testament, right? The Old Testament, the Bible does not try to achieve some awful. Anyway, so that's what small group did for me. It showed an environment where people are real, people are raw, people are not going to be perfect, but they're pursuing the gospel. So I was meeting with a buddy of mine who happens to be an independent filmmaker. And it was about something else. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to win favor with him. I'm going to give him a good idea. I said, Chris, you ought to make a movie, a Christian movie, because there's this great, there's a great market for Christian movies called Small Group. And he goes, wow, that's actually interesting. I'm in a small group. That's interesting. Why don't you go write it? And I thought, me write a movie? What? Oh, shucks. I don't know about that. Then I thought, oh, I can write a movie. How hard could it be? And which is a incredibly ignorant thing of me to say, but I think my ignorance actually helped me propel me forward. So I wrote a first draft, and it was interesting. It was kind of provincial because at the same time he was telling me to go write this movie, there was a gentleman who had moved from Hollywood to my hometown. He had been in Hollywood for 20 years, got blacklisted for making a relationship with a superstar, and that relationship didn't go well. So the superstar said, "You're blacklisted." So his specialty was developing writers and developing scripts. So he read my first draft, which I thought was pretty good. I would never let a soul read that first draft now because it was so awful. And he said, look, here's what we can do. If you want to go through my development process, the way it works is I don't write a word of your script. My job is to be the therapist for your script and help you tell your story. We look at everything constantly, like character development, story structure, making sure we are killing exposition and bearing everything in subtext. He said, and he told me about this process, and he said, how deep do you want to go on this? Because it's a deep dive, and we said, I'll go to China, whatever it takes. Let's make this story work, because I think we had something that was worth pursuing, and so we did. And so and I know one of the questions you wanted to talk about was writing, and if we can kind of dive into that, the writing is kind of the easy part. The development and the further drafts is where the magic really happens in screenwriting. Because what he would do is I would submit a 120-page script. He would take 30 hours reading through it, thinking through it, finding things that jump out at him and go, and not just, spelling errors or things like that, but really big issues of story and motivation and really and weaving. Stories have to be woven. When stories work for people, it's because they're properly woven. And that can't happen in one draft. It can't happen in 2 or 3 drafts. That happens over multiple drafts. So he would take notes. And this is where the notes process kind of diverges from what Hollywood does. Hollywood, some executive who you never see will take notes, and they're really destructive. This is terrible. This is awful. Do better here. And you open your 120-page script, and you see all these notes on it. And then you're left to interpret what they meant by that, and you're left not to be able to actually have a conversation with them. But his was different. Dale Wheatley, we would sit down together. He would just open his PDF, and we would start talking through his notes. And a lot of times, what would happen is one little note may bring up an issue, and he may have a suggestion on how to improve this little area. That suggestion, I may reject his suggestion, but his suggestion spawned me to do something even better. And so that's kind of how, or I may accept his suggestion. A lot of his suggestions were like, wow, that's brilliant. Thank you for that. A lot of little nuggets like that. And so we would have these sessions, these note sessions that would take, literally hours, 8, 10, 12 hours of a note session. And then I would go back and take a month or two to bang out a new draft based on my 30 pages of notes that I took from our session. We did that 9 times over 18 months. And that's why if you watch small group, a couple things people will say. One, they'll say, well, it starts off kind of slow. And that may be true. I could probably have done a better job. However, a lot of the stuff in the first 20 minutes is set up. And what that whole start slow thing is, it's subconsciously, it's the viewer saying, let's get this movie going. Let's get this movie going. Well, all these things we do to set up, well, they pay off later on in so many different ways. And if we didn't take the time to set them up properly in the first 20 minutes, you wouldn't get the payoff that works so well. So many different things woven in. And so, but that's something I got to do better next time is still achieve that setup, but maybe in less time. But that's where and that's why we were able to come out with a script that allowed us to actually make the movie, is that we spent so long and draft after draft after draft. We were concerned with it's so easy in a Christian film to lose sight of what our calling is. Jesus said himself, and I know a lot of times Christian movies are preaching to the choirs, but we're not supposed to just be doing that. We need to reach kind of fringe people and outside people too. And you don't reach those people with expositional sermons. And a lot of Christian movies are guilty of just being a sermon because it's so easy. I got to tell you, it's as a writer, if you have something you want to say, it's so easy just to put those words in sermon form awkwardly into a conversation with one of your characters because I need that to be said. Well, that's not what Jesus called us to do. He said, tell them stories, right? And that's that's the difference in exposition of an expositional sermon and subtextual. You have to bury your bury things in subtext, and you have to look at it not as a sermon, but as an opportunity of discovery, right? For me, a script should be what would happen if. Okay. And then you have your premise, my premise being what would happen if a documentary filmmaker who has a motivation to be objective took a good, hard, objective look at our culture. Would we accurately reflect Christ? Where would we go right? Where would we go wrong? What would he learn from that? So that was my objective, is to explore that. A lot of times I'll hear people like on the internet or whatever say, some Christian said something wrong in this movie. Christians shouldn't be saying that. They shouldn't be doing that. Well, we're not perfect. And if I were to write a movie where all the Christians said all the right things all the time, especially my character, it's not real. And so people are going to see that as disingenuine. And so that was our motivation, is just to tell a genuine story. And if a Christian says something he's not supposed to, well, guess what? That's real life. God will use this thing for what he said, what he wants it for. If we just tell the truth and we just, aim the truth for the gospel as best we can.
Awesome. I want to go back to, this idea came up for you in a small group setting and say they should make a movie of this. But do you feel there was a call from God to do this, or did you just, obviously you didn't do it for just fun because it took so long. I have to think that you had a very strong conviction and a strong call to do this movie. So I want to focus on vision and launching the project at the start. How did that come? Was it like the heavens opened up? Did you have a seed fall on you? Did you just start initially because you were interested? How was that process?
God made me too cocky and dumb to ever question whether or not I should do it. Maybe, I don't know. Okay. No. So, I've always been a creative, and that's always been my thing. And it's very clear to me when an idea is mine, because I've had some decent ones over the years, or when an idea is just given to me. Okay. When it comes from outside of me, that's very clear. I know when that happens. That moment that I talk about, somebody ought to make a movie called Small Group. That was not from me, because it just wasn't. I don't know. It wasn't in my plans at the moment, I don't think. So that idea was definitely not for me. I'm always careful though with that whole with the idea of what's our calling. I think God points us in directions and uses,
and you walk it out.
And you walk it out, and you're going to run into a wall here, and he's going to laugh at you and make you go that way. It's very easy when you're in my shoes to believe that God has this specific calling, and I've got to make this movie because this movie's going to reach people, and blah, blah, blah. That's easy to fall into, and when you do, you run into brick walls. His path for you is this, right? And it's not that's well. It's pretty easy for the Kendrick brothers, but for the rest of us filmmakers, it's not. And so my goal is to go, God, what did you want me to do? You want me to do this? Okay, lay it out for us. And it happens the way everything kind of laid out for us, the way things were paved for us, especially during during the fundraising part, during the pre-production, and during production itself. There were miracles that occurred. I mean, literal miracles that occurred left and right, that we just kept putting one foot in front of the other. And so it was definitely a response to faith, no doubt. I will say that here's the problem, and here's why I'm hesitant, because every Christian out there who has a desire to make film, I see this at the film festivals and that kind of thing. Everyone feels, it seems, that they've got a calling from God to be the next Kendrick brother. Everyone feels that their story, if we just had the right people behind us and the right money behind us, my story is going to save millions. And I think a lot of times what happens is they end up ignoring some of the things that they have to do to get there, and ignoring, actually reaping what you sow. You got to sow to reap. And I think I see that happen a lot. A lot of times they're so convinced of their calling that they're blind to making sure that what they're doing is of challenging themselves and make sure what they're doing is of high enough quality, and is obviously spiritually aimed. Most of them, their spiritual aim seems to be fine, but it's about how they craft the message, how that message is going to work, whether that message is going to work. So I just have to be. I'm always real careful with the calling thing. God points us in directions, like you say. We walk in that direction, and we'll see where He takes us.
So let me ask it this way. I want to ask it another way. So I'm a person who's also, I'm working in media, and I'm in the creative fields. I love creating new things. I love, I don't know if you like it, but I actually love the production days where we're with cameras and we shoot and we cut and all those kind of things. I do very short videos. So I do like educational videos. So we would talk about leadership or church management or whatever. We'll do 3 to 5 minute videos, but we'll do a lot of them. We'll shoot one day. We'll maybe two series, and we've got content for 3 months. Sometimes we work 2 or 3 days. We've got content for a year. Yeah. So there's ways of. I love that process. Now, for me, I want to do a lot of things at least once. But I'm hearing from you that and that was I think that was one of the reasons why I asked this question. If you make a movie, should you feel a strong calling to it, or do you think someone can do it just because I tried, even if it's just a short movie, like a short story, and it's 12 minutes long or whatever? Because there's a lot of this culture happening on YouTube where people are doing short stories and short films. Sometimes they're 3 minutes, sometimes they're 26 minutes. But it's definitely something that happens a lot on the internet, especially the last 10 years. Would you suggest someone tries it, or would you caution them to do it because of doing it excellently, or doing it just because you want to do it?
That makes sense. Well, especially when on production on the smaller levels, like I do on a day-to-day basis. Or kids. I always encourage kids, go make your YouTube videos. No, you don't have to be called to be the next Alex Kendrick in order just to start messing with it, because that's sometimes your calling is not going to come before you start. Your calling is going to come 5 years into what you're doing, right? So dive right in and learn production and learn all the aspects of production. The beautiful thing now is that you can get all the skills you need between YouTube and master classes, and then just going out and doing it and learning from each other and doing it with each other. So absolutely, yeah, get out. I encourage people to get out there and do it and tell stories. I think right now, I think there's a lack of storytelling. I think it's easier to do kind of what a lot of what I do and what you're doing, making, nonfiction videos and educational videos and sermon videos. Those are a lot easier than telling a story. But I think I don't think we have enough story out there. And I think we should be concentrate a little more on telling stories, because stories reach the heart way faster and stories will stick in the mind and the memory way better. That's why Jesus used parables. He had two things. Exactly. He preached sermons and he used parables. And so I'm more attracted to, in my professional life, I have to do a lot of more, I guess, sermon type things with video. But anytime I get to tell a story, that's obviously for me a much more impactful thing. And you don't have to do it at a small group. We had a $1.1 million budget for small group. You don't have to make a movie that's $1.1 million. And that's a small budget, but you could go out with your friends and a couple iPhones and a great idea and make a short film for, $12 and a pizza. Just go do it.
Just do it. Yes.
Just do it.
Matt, I want to go back a little bit. I want you to share with us your story, your background, because I can hear that you're kind of in the creative space. Mm-hmm. What do you do day to day? How did you get to where you are today?
Ooh, at 42, it's going to be a long. Well, it all started back when I was 10 years old. Well, in terms of my love for movies and storytelling, it can. One of people's favorite movies worldwide is an old movie from the 80s called My Cousin Vinny. You ever seen My Cousin Vinny? Course, yes. Right? So when I was 10 years old, they shot that movie in my hometown. And so the little town you see in that movie is my hometown. It's called Monticello, Georgia. It was population about 1,500 people. It still is not much bigger than that. There are literally 2 traffic lights in the entire county. So I guess people in South Africa can relate to some small rural areas. But I remember being 10 years old and the movie crew showing up in Monticello, and I'm standing on the street, and I'm watching the scene where Joe Pesci and Marissa Tomei pull their car right up and they hop out. I was disappointed because I didn't know who Joe Pesci and Marissa Tomei was. I heard that the Karate Kid was in this movie, so I was hoping Daniel LaRusso was going to hop out of that car. He did not. But it really sparked something in me at that time that I just had to be near it. I didn't know what it was. I just had to be near it. And so subsequently I got really involved in theater. And so I was a very, very, very involved actor all through middle school, all through high school, all through college. In high school, we had old VHS cameras at our high school and a little technology lab and edit board. And so I got really involved in that. Like I said, I went to college, and I was in college kind of at an exciting yet maybe unfortunate time for my education, because the educational system was still stuck in analog video, teaching you how to put together newsreels through beta tape, while the world was starting to transition to digital. So at my house, my partner and I, my business partner back then, we were already doing commercials and things like that in our little college town. We had invested in 1997 into this enormous computer with a 4 gig hard drive to put video on and nonlinear editing. So we kind of gave ourselves that education, and then just went to school for, I don't know why we went to school. But when we created a TV show in college, kind of a sketch comedy show that was just preceded YouTube, thank God, because it was very raw and raunchy, and I probably shouldn't have been doing it. Sorry, Lord, like Shane says. But I guess that they went off, and my 2 partners went off, and they're very successful, and I admire them for that. And they've got a show now on Netflix. They've had it on Fox before. So then I just kind of went into the production. I joined an ad agency as the director of production, did a lot of TV, a lot of radio, then I, went into radio for 3 or 4 years, doing sales and production. Then started my own agency, and so I was always just basically in the marketing firm. And so even now, today, that's what I do. It's part of what I do. I have lots of different jobs to put food on the table. I'm a voiceover artist. I've worked for a lot of streaming internet radio stations for quite a while. I'm a writer on a TV series right now. That's a wonderful TV series on PureFlix called Vindication that I've recently been brought on to do some writing with. I love that. It's a really good show. I'm like I said, part of my job is promoting small group and kind of doing the next thing. And then day to day, it's video production, just like probably just a lot like you. So I do a lot of work for nonprofits, a lot of work for businesses and small businesses and that kind of thing. Obviously, the goal is to make movies full time. That can be very difficult because I didn't go to a studio. I didn't get a studio deal to make small group. We raised that money through friends and family and business associates, right? And so we raised that money and made the film and put it out. One of the questions you asked earlier was, when did it go to market? And that's another really, really, really fascinating question, because when we made this movie, when we were making the movie back in 2016, we started in pre-production for the movie. I sat down with a lot of different people. But I sat down with Alex Kendrick, one of the Kendrick brothers, and we picked his brain on just producerial stuff. And he was so kind to sit down with us and talk to us about different things, gave us a lot of great advice. One of the things I asked him, though, was in terms of distribution, is that a difficult thing to go about getting distribution? Because we're making this movie and we don't have a distributor lined up because you kind of want to put your best foot forward before you start talking to distributors. And his whole advice to us was the same advice we got from other distributors: make a good movie and you'll have no problem. Well, while we were making the movie and while we were in post-production on the movie, that entire model changed beneath us. No longer did you have to actually just make a good movie and you'll get a deal. Now, these distributors are no longer actually funding the marketing of these movies. They don't want to bring their own, you ever heard the term P&A? It's prints and advertisements. They don't want to bring their own P&A to a lot of these, especially movies like ours that didn't have a big star. It's just that there's not a risk they need to take. Our movie didn't fit the formula, which is in one way a good thing, because when you don't fit the formula, you kind of expand the genre a little bit. But if you don't fit the formula, it's very difficult to get these studios to fund you and actually go out. So we had to. Our thought was, let's raise $500,000 or so, and let's just do a small theatrical release, prove the concept, and then a distributor will want to pick you up. So that's a big undertaking. And if you choose the wrong partners to manage this small theatrical release, it'll literally ruin everything, because it's very difficult to get fannies in seats. It's very difficult to get people to go to a theater to watch a movie, even if your movie's good. Our movie was testing through the roof. I mean, people loved it. Most of the comments were kind of like that. Like, this is not what I expected from a typical Christian movie. This is what we need. We got a lot of that. But so that in 2018, we launched this theatrical release in a very few number of screens kind of around the Georgia area as a proof of concept. Well, here locally, where we kind of managed our own marketing, we did great. We packed out theater after theater after theater. In the ancillary markets, kind of the outskirts of Atlanta and other places we were, literally no one showed up. No one knew about it. And so we went back to this person who was handling all this marketing and the distribution, and we said, we like to see like exactly how you spent all that money that we put in your bank account, because it was his job to manage the media. And he sent us a spreadsheet, and we said, no. No, I need to see the invoices of things money you actually spent. He refused, and still does to this day, refuses to account for how they spent the money. They said, well, that's just not how that's done in this industry. I'm like, that's how the world works, buddy. So anyway, whether it was managed properly, yeah, right, or whether it was just mismanaged, or whether it was outright fraud, that's up to the courts to discover. But it hurt, that it just killed that entire release. So then we were left scrambling, going like, now what do we do? If we just we have no money, if we just throw this thing into the to the home market, now we'll get swallowed whole. So we took it to a film festival. We actually won Best Picture at the International Christian Film Festival.
Wow.
We met some people and went through like a year and a half more of just trying to find our way. Finally found a great distributor, Ocean Avenue Entertainment. And right when we started working with him, COVID happened. And so then we had to just redo everything. So it took us, not 9 months to get all of that going. And finally, after shooting this, having the concept for this movie in October of 2014, after shooting it in fall of 2016, the failed release of 2018, finally in 2020, we released to the home market. And October of 2020, it's like every October this movie does something, or every 2 Octobers. So and it's going great now. It was an interesting time to release because there was not a lot of new content out there. And it's doing really, really, really well on Amazon. We've got great reviews on Amazon. It's growing, and so people are responding in the same way that they always have to it. Most people think that's a pretty good movie. Some people think, wow, it's a really good movie. But all of them are definitely know that it's a movie that kind of expands the genre a little bit. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see what the life of this movie does, and if it continues to inch forward, then we'll have hopefully opportunities to do other things and make other movies as well.
Awesome. I noticed that there's largely at the moment, it's largely a streaming, a thing that's being streamed and bought online. Is that what you guys initially intended? Did you want to go into theaters, etc., but because of COVID that changed?
Or no, like I said before, we had a little theatrical release. The plan was, okay, to do a theatrical release, a proper theatrical release, it costs tens of millions of dollars, right?
Okay.
So you got to have a studio to come back that. So we decided to do this tiny little test theatrical release back in 2018 to hopefully prove the concept so that investors would come in and do a wider, kind of a platform release. So the plan was definitely theatrical. We've screened this movie in theaters dozens and dozens of times, and the experience of watching it in a theater is so much better than the streaming experience. But like I said, that kind of fraudulent handling of that test release killed any chances we would ever have of this being now a wide theatrical release. However, there are no wide theatrical releases anymore. I was looking at AMC's stock. AMC is the biggest movie company in America, and its stock used to be at $35 a share, and it's at $2 a share. Now, so there's no movies, there's no theatrical industry. So, I think COVID pretty much said that we weren't going to get back in theaters anyway, because basically once you have a little test, even if it's on just a few screens, if it flops, then you don't get to tell the powers that be, well, it flopped because we got money stolen from us. They don't care. They just look at the movie and go, next. So, I'd love for it to be in theater. However, I think the model is changing a lot. I don't think you're going to see a lot of Christian movies going to the theaters or movies of this size going to the theaters simply because of the risk involved. Certainly, you're not going to see movies that kind of bend the genre, or if it's going to be a Christian movie, it's going to be incredibly formulaic to go into the theater. I mean, that's the same thing in secular film. Yeah, very Hallmark. The reason is if a studio is going to invest tens of millions of dollars into marketing it, it's got to be it can't be a risk for them. They got to know this is the formula that works. It's got a star, it's got pedigree, it's based on a true story or IP. There's all these things that they say it's got to have this formula. And so unfortunately, I don't think you're going to have high impact art that bends the genre, that stretches things, that reaches audiences outside of the norm. You're not going to see that in theaters. You're going to see that in smaller independent films in the home market like ours.
I want to help the people that we spoke of that maybe has this vision. They're either doing small stories, or they now want to graduate to bigger things. And I sent you kind of the flow of how I want to drive the interview. But I think one of the things for anybody that wants to start doing something like this is, how do I get started? Where do I get started? What's the first thing? Is it the script?
Yeah.
Is it what is the first step in creating your own movie? If you have a vision or a desire to create a Christian or evangelical movie.
Yeah, first step is the script. It's always, because everything comes from your story. It's not that. This is what I learned actually in the process, that the script is not just to give somebody, the actors, something to read and get their words from. The script is where everyone who works on the film uses that as their Bible for the production, right? So I would say learn proper screenwriting. A lot of people will try to take shortcuts because I'm just doing things at a small level or whatever. I get sent scripts all the time that are written in Microsoft Word with no formatting, or that are just not properly written scripts. I won't read them, because my whole thing is, you got to put the work in to learn this craft before you can dive into this. No one's going to come and give you a shortcut and help you fix that. So learn proper script writing. It may cost you $200 to get final draft software, but you know what? If you're going to mow lawns, it's going to cost you $500 to buy a lawnmower. Like, get the proper tool and use the proper tool, and really learn what script writing is about. I would really encourage people getting started to concentrate on coming up with great stories that move people. Really find a way to come up with a story that moves you internally, that is not a sermon, that is not your message to the world, that is not it's more about story than it is about you trying to preach the gospel yourself. The gospel will shine through story if you are properly inspired and motivated by it. But just tell good stories. I look at some of the parables Jesus told, and they left us thinking. A lot of them, these parables, left us thinking. He didn't end all of his parables by going, okay, and so what that means is, no.
He left it open to interpretation. Yeah.
Left it open to, I say, discovery. Interpretation, yeah, but it's discovery, because that's what he wants us. He wants his stories to pull us in and go, what does that mean? Make us think, make us connect, make us read scripture. And that's what your movie should do. Your movie should make people go, And so if you want to make a story, I always say, start off with a premise, a question, a discovery. What would happen if? And whatever's in that blank, make it interesting, make it engaging, make it intriguing, make it magnetizing, make it pull the reader toward you. Because if you do that, you'll have something special. So then you write your script, and you have to develop that script. I like to work with someone who understands the script writing process, another writer or development producer, and really work with them and do draft after draft after draft after draft, because that's where you really weave things in. As you start reading your fourth draft, you realize, oh, wait, this character here said something that I kind of have to pay off later on here. When you do those little things and get it woven, that's when you get this feeling of satisfaction from your audience that something that's set up is properly paid off, things like that. So yeah, start off with a script, write a great story, and then just go shoot it. You can use, like I said, you can use your iPhone and YouTube, and it's trust me, if you do something at a low budget but it's really good, you're gonna find your next step. God's gonna lead the way to your next step, whatever that is. If your goal is just always tell a great story that moves people, a gospel-centered story that moves people, just do that to the best of whatever abilities you have right now. Just always try to improve those abilities, and doors will be opened for you. Your path will be opened, and you can't go wrong doing that. Just serve him and constantly ask him what story he wants you to tell as well.
Awesome.
Be very spirit driven and solving creative problems. I solve all my creative problems lying in bed in that time when I kind of between when I wake up and get up. I just lay there and I'm just constantly praying and asking for, okay, what do you want? What do you want that character to say? What do you want that character to do? Show me, show me, show me. And just kind of being spirit led, boom, it'll pop into your head. And that's when you bound out of bed and run into the other room and write what you saw.
Tell me something. You said you went through this process of drafting about 9 times. What if you want to do this and you're starting out? Do you have to be a good or great writer? Can you have a concept and you write something? And obviously the formatting is important, but can you write down what you think you want to tell? Because there's a difference between a great story and actually the writing must be plausible, the writing must be decent. So do I have to be a great writer? If I have this concept, do I write what I feel it should be, and then I give it to someone that maybe is better or does script writing for a living? Can I trust that with someone else?
Yeah, trust is a big deal. I'm not a great writer, and I wrote a movie, and I've written TV shows, so anybody can do it. No, I think it takes a certain level of acumen. Just like anything else, could I go build a house from scratch? Probably. I mean, if I really put my mind to it, would I do a good job? I wouldn't want to live in that house if I were you. But that doesn't mean that nobody's going to be a great writer when they start out. No one. You may have an acumen for it, a God-given talent for it, but you're going to have to develop your skills. You're going to have to develop, and the only way to do that is to do it. So no, you don't have to be a great writer or a seasoned writer. You don't have to think, well, gosh, I don't know anything about screenwriting. That shouldn't hold you back. What that should do is go, I should learn something about screenwriting. So go educate yourself on these on the skills necessary for good writing. All that stuff's out there. It's on the internet. It's accessible to anybody. For now, until our tech overlords decide we don't need to be writing things like that and just ban everything. Just go find the information and do it. I guess your question is, do you have to be an expert before you start? The answer is absolutely not. I wasn't an expert when I started. I did the best I could to educate myself. And then God paved a way to bring somebody to me who was an expert. Does that mean you should not do it if you don't have access to an expert? No, absolutely not. But everybody, I guarantee you, everybody knows somebody who's written a screenplay who has a little more experience than they do, or a writer who has more experience than they do. So that's all that is what you want to do if you find someone to work with you to help you develop your story, your script. They have to have the only motivation they should have is to help you better tell your story. That's one thing that Dale, my development producer, was great about. Here's a little news flash that would scare people. He's not a believer at all.
Wow.
Okay. But
wasn't that difficult?
Not at all. Because his whole thing was, look, if there's anything in this about your message or your theology, I'm hands off. I'm leaving that up to you. My job is to help you tell the story. Right, because those two things they're different. They're together, but they're different. And so, if there's ever anything, any aim that we needed to take that was, that had to do with, what does the Bible say we should? He was hands off on all of that stuff. He's like, oh no, his whole thing was character motivations and all that stuff. Now, because he's very, very, very faith friendly, right? And if you can run into the wrong person who's going to want to shape your story for you in their own and non-biblical worldview. And there were times that his worldview would creep in and I'd be like, nope, sorry, dude. That's your non-biblical worldview. I'm going to lock down on this. And he'd go, yeah, okay, sorry, no problem. He knew when that line was crossed that he had no desire for an influence there. I think he was probably rare. So be very, very careful with that because, while we do want to influence the world, what we can't do, obviously, is to let the world influence us, pull us off the line of the gospel in order to make the world like us. And so we have to be obviously very, very careful with that.
I want to get into, obviously when you have a project like this, you got to start building your team because there's different skills that's needed, and people need to come on board. Some people carry the vision, others execute it, etc. But before I do, I just want to mention something interesting. Maybe Matt, you can agree with me. For those that are watching, there's a great resource online. It's called masterclass.com. And on that, you have actors like Samuel L. Jackson, Natalie Portman, teaching on acting. There's also great people teaching on screenwriting. It's really affordable, and there's lots of amazing resources there if you want to do something like this and you want to go teach. And obviously, we're in a masterclass with Matt Chastain right now. So Matt, now I've gotten started. I wrote my script. I've watched a lot of movies or series where there's a character that does screenplays or script writing. One that I remember is Chesapeake Shores. This was one character who does plays, etc. And what I've also seen there is your script is never really done. At some point, you have to stop and say, okay, we're going to settle on what we have. But, once you feel comfortable with your script, you have to move forward. And now you have to start building your team. And there's lots of different facets of that. Was there a point where you said, okay, what did your team look like initially? Obviously, it grew as it grew momentum. The team grew, but that first core team of yours that you started working with to get this vision come to pass, what was that team like, and what skills and people were involved?
That's a great question. So, okay, first, there's one step between script and building your team that we had to go through that not everybody will have to go through depending on their budget, but we had to raise money. At that point, we had me, the writer director, we had Dale, the creative producer, and we had Chris Hines, the business producer. That's the team. And in order to build a team that can actually make this movie, we had to obviously raise the budget. So this is a crazy thing. I spent way more time writing and developing this movie than we spent raising the money. We had our first session, or info session about this project in January of 2016. And by May of 2016, that's 5 months, we had already raised 60% of the budget, which is called the go number. Once you raise 60% of the budget, you go ahead with the project. So we'd already raised it. And by summertime, we'd raised all of it. We raised $1.1 million in just 5 or 6 months. And so
before you go into the actual team building, Matt, can you give me a little bit of an idea? What are the exercises that you did to raise funds? Which platforms did you use? How you said friends and family?
Right.
What were some of the other avenues that you used?
Right. Well, back then the laws were different around here. We couldn't do like a GoFundMe or anything like that because of legal reasons. They can't be an owner in it and that kind of thing. We simply, you took the budget and we divided it by a number of shares. We had $1.1 million divided by 55 shares. That's 20,000 each. So we went out trying to sell $20,000 shares in this movie. Now, this is something that younger filmmakers aren't able to do because their entire world, the only people they know are other filmmakers. And if only people you know are other filmmakers, or if only people you know are in ministry, you don't know anybody who got money. So I had been in the professional world for quite a while, and thankfully I'm blessed with family who is a lot of business owners in my family who could kind of step up as well. So, but it wasn't easy. I mean, it wasn't like I could just, call Uncle Jim and say, "Hey, Uncle Jim, I need a bunch of money." "Yeah, no problem. Here's a check. I'll just throw it away." No, like the people, my friends, family, and business associates, they had to actually believe that this was possible to recoup that money. I don't think they all wanted to get rich. They just all wanted to help me do the thing. They believed in me. They believed in the script. But they didn't want to obviously throw the money away. So what I did was I just started a list.
Did you write a business plan?
Oh yeah. Well, there's a PPM and a business plan. I skip all that part because I didn't do that. The business producer Chris Hines did all that. Okay. He does the hard stuff, the boring stuff, the stuff I hate. My job was to sell it, and so I literally Google Sheets, filed new. And I just made a long list of people. And then I did, you talk about video production. I kind of invented something called, or not invented, but I just started using pitch videos, semi-customizable pitch videos, where my thought was, if I can get a meeting with someone to pitch this thing face to face, I got a really high shot of getting them in on a share. So I got my list and I made an informational video, and I made different versions for every person I sent it to. And so the first 30 seconds are, hey, Jim, good to talk to you. Thanks for watching this video. I want to share something with you real quick about a project I'm doing. And then seamlessly, it would go into the meat of the video, which is the same. And then at the end, Jim, thanks so much for watching this. I hope this has inspired you. Listen, I'm not asking for your commitment. I just want to sit down with you. Can we just sit down and talk about this? If so, let me know. So you create this personalized message that allows the person to engage with your content in a time that's good for them, when they're over morning coffee, when they're not having to have the nervousness of you across from them, because a pitch right in front of somebody can be a little more tension involved. And then my ask was not big. I did not make an ask for the money, but it was specific. My ask was specific and easy to say yes to, which was, let's meet. And so I sent that to probably 30 of those videos out, and more, 50, I don't know. And that ended up creating enough meetings to raise the money.
Tell me something, Matt. So just to make this maybe a teaching moment for people that are looking at, okay, I'm getting started. Fundraising is important. It's the step, Matt says, it's the step between getting started, just your script has been written, and now building your team. There's something called fundraising. And Matt, what Matt did is he went and Google Sheets, made a list of people. Matt, I want to say having a network, or going to network into a network, is very important. And then you made custom messages for everybody that you wanted a meeting with. You did it in phone. I love what you said, because that is in online marketing and business, it's important that you don't just have one message and you send it to everybody. Making it personal, connecting, etc. is very important. Matt, my one question, the list that you made in Google, was that a list of people with money, or was it a list with people that you knew, or just
both?
Was it both? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I can sit down with my mom and pitch her this, and my mom would love to write that check. My mom doesn't have the money, so it's. So
you don't want to go there, okay?
Yeah, and that's where I think we were more blessed than most people, is that I have access to a good network of people who have been financially blessed. Not everybody has that, but that's my path. Look, I'm telling you, that's. No one makes $1 million feature film on their first feature. That's why we were able to do it. That's it. But it's okay if you can't do that too. You can make a $500 feature and raise, or not feature, but a $500 short and raise your own. And if that does well, go, make a $1,000 one. And then if that does well, there's a million different ways to kind of rise the ranks. If you tell a great story, a story that is different, a story that moves people, you'll get there. So, but I don't want to stay in the clouds, because I know we have some specific things to talk about. So okay, now we got the money. What do we do? And that was a good question I had. I had no idea how this whole thing worked. Thank God that my creative producer has gone through this before.
You before you did the fundraising, you had 3 people on your team. It was a business manager, you, and was the other role?
Well, so 2 producers, the business producer, okay, and then what I call the creative producer.
All right, and then you raised funds. What was the next step you went into building the rest of the team?
Right. So the rest of the team, I would say the next most important thing is casting. And so we got a casting director who helped us dive into the casting process. I was very involved in that. Obviously, the casting director's job is to just organize the whole thing. We did all the casting online using Actors Access, which is I'm not sure if you guys have that over there, but it's a medium, a hub between casting agents, agents themselves, so actors and producers. And so our casting director put out our film on Actors Access, did all the things she had to do to organize the roles, and then she started getting submissions. People would submit headshots and resumes for each role, and then she would decide whether or not we wanted to see an audition for that role. For the role of Mary, the Scott's wife, for instance, I think she received over 1,200 submissions. So she had to go through all those submissions and narrow it down to kind of what I wanted. And she narrowed it down to maybe 500. 500 different ladies self-taped auditions for the first round. And then she narrowed that down. The casting director did for me because there are 30 roles we auditioned in this film, so I couldn't look at 500 auditions times 30. So she narrowed that down to about 150 for the role of Mary. So I had to watch all 150, and then I had to narrow that down and then do a second round of auditions. And it was all just me at my computer at night, just watching audition after audition after audition. Again, I just used I would just close my eyes, not think about anything, and just say, okay, what score would I give that audition? 87. Not thinking about it, just trying to use my subconscious where God lives, and then I would just sort them all by the ranking and go, oh, really? She was the best? Oh, interesting. But we did that for every single role. So casting is a big part. So you get your casting director. Next is
Matt. Just hold on for me. So that process, you said you got a lot of. Is it initially just photographs, and then when you got the 500 list down to 500, those 500 sent you videos?
They all auditioned, yeah, and they use Actors Access, right? They'll tape their audition, blah 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 blah, and they simply upload it to their app, and they're all right there in Actors Access. It does a great job of lining everything up for you. But yeah,
so you went from the big number to 500, and then what was the next number? Was 150?
Yeah, I think I saw 150 auditions initially, and then I narrowed that down to maybe 30 for a second callback, and then narrowed it down to about 5. So okay. I'm not thinking.
And then from the 5, you chose your final.
From the 5, I chose maybe. Yeah, exactly. In fact, this is interesting. When the movie, I'm not sure if you saw a movie called Unplanned. It was really big last year. Anyway, there was the actress who made a big name in Unplanned. She was not a huge name before that. But when I saw that movie come out, I thought that actress sounds familiar. So I went back and I looked at my old my list, and she was my number 2 choice in small group. So it was really interesting how that works. But so yeah, I did that, and that was I did that for the top 30 characters, and kind of cast the movie that way. So my job in pre-production was casting first and foremost. And then the next thing you do is, and then locations. So I know you had locations as one of your things. So that's another thing that in my little town, it's a university town. If you ever heard of the University of Georgia, it's in Athens, Georgia, about 90 minutes northeast of Atlanta. And I've been here for 23 years. And so I've been in the business world. So I have a great network, a lot of contacts. I know exactly, and I wrote it seeing certain places, right? And so I did all my own, or most, I would say, of my own location scouting, because I saw it in my head when I wrote it, and then I know people, and so I was able to go to this restaurant and go, hey guys, I'm making a movie, can I? And unfortunately, for everybody else, my job was really easy. All I had to do is get them to say yes, and then I handed them on to the casting or the locations people who did all the really hard work. So the hospital, for instance, there's a big scenes in the hospital. Very hard to shoot at a hospital, but at that time, the head of PR at the hospital was a very good friend of mine who we're in JCs together, or a junior chamber together. And so it was easy to go to him. Yo, Mike, I'm gonna shoot my video or shoot my movie at the hospital. Yeah, no problem. So it's good to know people. We had a hard time finding a church. That was a difficult thing because we had one church in mind, and they kind of hem and hawed, and they were in construction, and they finally, 3 weeks from shooting, and they're sorry, you can't shoot here. So I had to go find one, and it was just a cold call. I walked into a church that's kind of out near my house and said, hey, I'm shooting a movie. Can I shoot it here? And they were like, yeah, it sounds great. So that was a godsend big time. So there's casting. Now, and while this is going on, while casting and location scouting is going on, we've got to start building the entire team. There's 2 things you do. One is you look for a line producer. The line producer is...
I manage the budget, right?
Well, yes and no. He manages the budget, but he also brings in the crew. He has all the different crew, because the whole crew is like a pockets of individual people who work together all the time, right? You have your assistant director team. So he brings in the assistant director, and the assistant director brings in his whole team. Your line producer, he helped us find a director of photography. He helped us find a DP. And so then once I found a great DP, now the DP brings in all of his people, his camera ops, his gaffer, his ACs. He brings in his whole team. And so your line producer really not only just manages the budget, but really manages the people. He has all the relationships.
Wow.
That's how your crew fills out, as you make that one. Now, my other job is to interview the department heads. And again, he kind of helped us interview some department heads, but it's really my job to determine which ones I want to work with. So my job is the DP is a big one. The costume designer, although the costume designer is kind of under the production designer. Really, it's the production designer is the big one. Production designer is the person who's in charge of the visuals, of everything you see on screen. It's their job to think of everything, build sets, put things, anything that's not living that's on the page or on the screen is the production designer's job. That includes, he's also in charge of the costume designer and the makeup people and all that, and the construction, all that. So we had a brilliant production designer who, he's not with us anymore, God rest his soul, but a wonderful Christian man who just brought this amazing work ethic and made, he was given no budget and did amazing things with it. So the production designer's big. The DP is big. The DP's got to be somebody who the director can work with. That's another thing. And then the one role that I did not have any say on, I just showed up and they said, here's your guy, was the assistant director. And thank God I had the assistant director I did. The AD, a lot of people don't know this, they call him the first AD. The first AD runs the set, okay? In the movies, you see the director, cut everybody, you go over there, you go. That doesn't happen. My job is to be quiet. In fact, on the first day, I think I said something the whole set. And the AD walks up to me and goes, "Sir, I'll take care of my people. Thank you." I was like, sorry. The director's job is just to sit quietly and interact with a very few people. I interact a lot with the AD because he comes to me, sir, okay, do you want to do that again? Do you want us to reset this? Blah, blah, blah. He asks a lot of questions based on all the jobs that he's in charge of. And then he goes off and directs his crew to do it. The DP, same thing. I work with the DP specifically. The DP will consult with hey, do you want this or do you want this? Where's that shot? What's the fit? So I consult with the DP. And I consult with the script supervisor. The script supervisor's in my ear all the time, making sure that we're getting everything, making sure that there's not inconsistencies that's going to kill us in the edit. And then I work with the actors. Actors are the big one for me. I love working with actors. And so that's my crew is so awesome. They allowed me. They were able to do their job. I just answered questions. And by the way, that's the job of the director. The director is simply the liaison on set to the story. If you want to be a good director, know your story and be able to make smart, quick decisions. And you have to find this wonderful balance between not getting run over by the millions of ideas that are going to come at you, but while also not being so stuck to your own vision, right? We talked earlier about how, God gives us a calling, so to speak, but sometimes it's blurry. In fact, it's good if it's a little blurry, and your job is to do the things you have to do to bring that vision into focus, and he helps you do that. Same on set. My vision was not as specific for every little thing as a lot of directors. I didn't want it to be, because someone would come up to me with an idea. The costume designer would say, "Ooh, what if we did this? Wow, you just thought of something I never thought of. That makes my movie better. Thank you." Actors would come up, "Hey, what if we did this?" And a lot of times that makes the movie better. You're like, you thought of something I didn't think of. Now, the hard part is, especially our lead actor, that dude is brilliant. And I have to kind of hone him into to the vision a little bit while giving him the room to do that. Because a lot of times actors will, or anybody on set will kind of get a great idea that's super creative and interesting, but it's not consistent with where you need that scene to go necessarily. So it's your job to hone that in and not let that take you out of control, but be loose enough to let it make your film better. There's so many things that our lead actor just blurted out on set that were way better than the script. There was even a scene we added that he didn't get fired up much, but in this he got fired up, and I supported him all the way, because there was a scene after the first small group where he is trying to take the hidden camera that he placed. He's trying to take it out.
And he almost got caught.
And I walked in and almost catch him. And that scene wasn't in the script. We were on set, and Sterling, who played Coop, he said, we have to shoot a scene where I'm taking this away or something. He said, we cannot. You can't leave a hidden camera in somebody's house. That's an invasion of privacy. It takes this thing more than I'm willing for my character to go. He's like, and I'm having to cross a few lines here that I don't want to cross, but I'm not going to cross that line of decency. So we got to get that out. And I thought, okay. And so he and I sat down and just improv that whole scene, where I told him, I stole it from an old lady. It helped to not only allow that device of him getting that, allow a little tension of him also getting caught, but also further develop my character as a guy who says things he shouldn't say. So it's really interesting how the whole creative process works, and I love it.
Awesome. Can we go into the experience with the actors for a while? You mentioned a little bit about how do you get them, the casting process, and you mentioned that you loved working with them and interacting with them. So now everything's on the move, and I got my actors together, and the team is there. When do we start shooting? And what is the experience with the actors like from your perspective? Do they come to you? Do they check in? Do they, how does that work? Do you actually work with the script and say, okay, now you come in, you do this? Do you work with the flow of that?
So that there's the people, the first AD and all those people organize your day, okay? And they organize what we're going to shoot by location and all the logistics, right? That I would never want to have anything to do with. So on day one, I walk in. I had never been a movie director before, and I walk in. I'm looking at these giant cameras and all this stuff, and I'm saying, okay, I'm going to shoot this scene here, and so it's not even my choice what we shoot when, right? We're shooting this scene, and they have these, it's called a call sheet. It breaks down, organizes everything, the actors that need to be there, the location, blah blah blah. So the first scene we shot in the movie, for instance, was the scene where it's at the end of the movie where Coop comes into the bar and confronts Ballard. Ballard's sitting there eating chicken wings, and he confronts him about what he's done. That's the first thing we shot, and then the second scene we shot backs up to the beginning of the movie, which was the when they had dinner with Coop, or with Ballard at the very beginning of the movie. The reason we did that was because we only had that actor for two days, so you have to get him shot out first. So we walk in, and the first thing that happens is that all the department heads, the AD, the production designer, and the DP, and the director, and the actors do what's called a walkthrough. We talk about the scene. We talk about what the scene should do. We walk through the scene with them. That's not an acting rehearsal. It's just a rehearsal for everybody to look and go, okay, now I know what my job should be. After that happens, that takes 10 minutes, right? And after that happens, and during when that's happening, I'm getting pelted with questions from the assistant director about different things, background actors and what should be here, and props may ask me some questions. I'm answering questions from the DP about how he wants the shot set up, and then once that conversation's out of the way, then they go, okay, we're good. Now they're going to go take 30, 45 minutes to then do their thing, get their lighting set up, get their cameras set up, get their dolly movement set up, blah, blah, blah. At that time, actors are then going to go to wardrobe and makeup. And so I typically go with them to wardrobe and makeup and sit there and discuss the scene. Now, with a budget like ours, I didn't get 3 weeks to rehearse with actors. I got 2 days to rehearse with our lead two, Coop and Mary. And we just ran lines and talked about the motivation and why this person said that. And, a good actor, all they need is the proper motivation. It's a cheesy kind of cliche. What's my motivation? But truly, if a good actor is honestly motivated by something within them, then they will deliver a genuine performance. And especially if those motivations can be layered a little bit, especially if they're trying to hide something, you know what I'm saying? Like, we have to really work on who that person is and why that person does and says the things that they do. That's a big, it's not just about the story that they're interacting with and the lines they have to say, but why is that person the way they are? What is their motivation to be that way? So we did a lot of that. So I would work with the actors in hair and makeup, and then maybe run the lines a little bit and talk through it. And then we go back to set. Now we're doing a hair and makeup rehearsal. We do a rehearsal. We kind of get everything right. When everybody's comfortable, that's when we start shooting. And so we start shooting a scene, and it's my job to sit there. A lot of directors like to be right on set with them and watching them. I tried that and I kind of like it, but the problem is if I'm there on set with them, I can't see what the audience sees. I can't hear what the audience hears. So instead, I like to go to Video Village and sit there and actually watch the screen, and I want to see what the audience is seeing and hear what they're hearing, and you watch all my camera angles. We shot 2 cameras at once. Mostly, so I want to see both of those, and I want to, and so then it's just about getting take after take until you get enough options that you know that this thing will cut together. That's where movies fall apart a lot of times, is when you don't get enough options, and you get editing issues. So lots of ways to work around the editing issues. One thing we did wrong, if I can kind of get into the weeds a little bit, is, and we corrected this as a couple weeks into the shooting, but we would start off by shooting the master, which is the wide shot. And then let's say there's a conversation of 2 people on a couch. We would shoot the master with the wide shot, and then we'd use another camera to shoot one person's angle of the conversation. Then once we had that set up like we liked, we get that other camera and point it at the other person, and then do something else with the, we'd call it a special, hands on a phone, something like that. The problem with that is now we're using 2 different takes on the close-up shots.
You must shoot it all at once. When
we should have shot the master and there's different ways to do it. A lot of people think you get the best out of an actor on their first 2 or 3 takes. So if you want to be in tight on coverage first to get that best out of them, and then shoot the master and maybe a special second. But sometimes it takes an actor 4 or 5 takes. So you want to get the master first, get that out of the way, because typically in the edit, you're out of that master and into coverage real quick. So you can use one of the early takes for that. But the key is, no matter when you're shooting it, if I'm shooting cross coverage where I'm shooting a conversation, especially if it's dirty, meaning especially if you see my shoulder, the blurry my shoulder in the same shot as the person you're focusing on, and you see their shoulder in the shot that I'm focusing on, you're able to shoot with 2 cameras. You want to shoot those two shots the same, so that you have the same takes to work with. Because a person's arm, it's going to be here, or your hand's going to be up. There's so many of those stupid little issues that you'll find in post production that make it so hard to cut the thing together. So we figured that out later. That we needed to be doing that. So lots of little things like that. But for me, it's once you get those things out of the way, and if you have a good script supervisor who makes sure that you covered everything, and that you haven't missed a line, or you haven't missed an action that needs to be shot, that you have enough to cut the thing together, you concentrate on the emotional performance of the actors. So then you get the scene. I would say typically I do 3 to 5 takes tops. I find when you do more than that, you just wear everybody out and they don't even know what they're saying anymore. Right. We had one, this is what's called a oneer, which is basically a 1 minute walk and talk on a Steadicam. We shot that thing, I think, 15 takes. And I remember at the end of that, the whole crew, the actors, everybody were just getting so tired. But we had to get it, and we never got it. We ended up using in the film the first take, which was a blown take for camera. Like the performance was great, but the camera was awful on that first take. We still used it in the movie because that's the thing is it's takes are not just did the actors get it right. It's did the guy pulling focus get it right? Did the camera movement get it right? Everything. So all these things kind of have to come together, and everybody's got to bring their level of professionalism. So then you get that you get that scene cut, and then the AD comes over. Sir, are you ready to move on? I say move on. We move to the next setup, and
Awesome.
And the thing is, you gotta get it. You got to get it right. You got to get it done well. You can't rush, but you got to make your day. Because if you get to the end of the day and you haven't shot everything you need to shoot that day, tomorrow is already booked. The next day is already booked. These different locations, these different actors, they're already booked. So the job of the director, again, as a balancing act, is to get what you need. Your first AD, his job really is to get his day. He doesn't care what you get on camera. He's got to get through to get his day. The job of the DP and everybody around you is to get it right. So my job as a director is to find that balance and make sure everybody's doing their job that can allow you to get through your day in a timely fashion.
Can you just quickly explain to everyone what a video village is? That is insider talk, and it's something that people don't generally know about. Your video village is basically a staging area where you look at the footage. You mentioned it, you're not in the actual production process. You're way back and you're watching a screen.
Depends on where you're shooting, but yes. So let's say we're shooting. For instance, there's one scene that we shot in small group. It's in a very small bathroom. And it's a very emotional scene. Like we had our DP sitting in a bathtub with an Alexa. It was a mess, man. But obviously I couldn't be in there with them. I couldn't be head hanging around. And so we would set up a room in that little house where all our lines were fed to. And Video Village is a dark place. Outside, it's in a tent. Inside, they'll put it in a dark room, and it's where we just set up monitors so I can see what they see and I can hear what's going on the mics. So that's just kind of where I spend time. A lot of directors, some directors don't like to do that. The more purist directors want to be right up on it. But again, I want to see what the camera is seeing, because it's not just about what the actors are doing. It's about, I may have notes for my camera op. I go, hey man, I need that tighter. I need to feel this or something like that, because it all comes together. So yeah, sitting in Video Village. Now, our VIPs on set, I have a brother-in-law who owns a gutter company, and he let me use I owned a gutter company in the movie. So I got to use and put his shirts on and drive his gutter truck around. And so he's an investor in it. And so he got to come to set one day. And so our VIPs, I'd bring them into Video Village and let them watch a few takes. And what's funny about that is, even people outside of the movie industry, there's something magic about being in the Video Village and watching this stuff happen, and kind of watching out there and seeing the action, and then watching Video Village and hearing it come together. Amazing. There's something magic. And he didn't come until like the second to the last day of shooting, and he said that he's glad that he didn't, because he would have just skipped work the whole time to just sit there and watch the movie get made. So Video Village is a magical. But I've got a great picture. I should have sent this to you when we were in Guatemala, because that's something we haven't even got into. We shot for a week in the most dangerous neighborhood in Central America, in Guatemala. One of my favorite pictures is of me and my Guatemalan script supervisor and three or four little village kids all crowded around us in Video Village, talking, looking at the screen, all serious and picking shots with these little Guatemalan kids around us. Nice. It was so fun.
Tell me something. I want to go back to the actors and two things. One, when the actors deliver, and I'm making an assumption because I think I saw it somewhere. Does every actor, because the actor must have context when they go and deliver their lines and act, do they all have a backstory that they draw from to deliver that? Because obviously it's not always in the movie. And do you, as the writer, write that backstory for every character so they can read it and they know where they come from? It's
a great question. I like it for them to have a backstory. Only if it serves their purpose and their role. Backstory is all about motivation, right? It's about building what motivates this person. So the purpose of the backstory is that different actors have different methodologies. And so a lot of that craft type stuff I leave up to them, and it's my job to support that. A lot of actors will ask for that, ask for the backstory. I had one actor, though, who it was a challenge because she preferred to substitute. Sometimes she just couldn't make herself feel empathy for the situation based on it. And so she would ask me to come up with a situation in her life that emotionally would parallel the situation that this character was going through. And that was kind of a pain. I don't like substitution. I know it allows you a little easier access maybe to genuine emotion, but you're not connecting with your character when you do that. But I prefer the whole backstory. And so, yeah, one of the things that I did, especially with the auditions for the small group members, because the small group members, they didn't have a lot of lines, but I knew I wanted good actors who knew their characters, because that stuff comes across. When you just have an actor who's just sitting there to fulfill a visual, who's just sitting there to say a few lines, it comes across. I think in small independent movies, one way you know they're cheaply done is when they have bad actors in those small roles. We've got some really good, strong actors, any of whom could lead a film in the small group itself, many of whom don't have a lot of lines. And so for their auditions, I wrote sides, I wrote monologues that weren't even in the movie. I wrote monologues that were kind of about their background and who they were. And so those monologues that we auditioned, it allowed us to see who they are in the audition process, obviously, but it also allowed them to learn more about their characters and their motivations.
You mentioned that you didn't have a lot of time with the characters to do rehearsals, etc. One thing in the process that I also assume exists is something called the table reading. That you didn't speak of that. Was that something that you did or nothing?
We never did a table read.
Okay.
We just started shooting. There was a lot of scheduling issues due to that. We were bringing so many actors in and out that it was, I'll say that we did kind of a table read just with Coop and Mary and Casey, because the little girl in the movie, the little 6-year-old daughter, she's my daughter in real life. So obviously we had access to her. And then Coop and Mary came a couple days early. So we did a lot of reading with them, but never a chance to just get the whole cast together and do a table read, because so many of the cast members, they weren't there on day one. We didn't bring them in till day 7, or they may be gone on day 3. And so many of the people in this movie never met each other, because the movie happens kind of in such an odd, linear story. So all the stuff in Guatemala, for instance, and we had Guatemalan actors who we didn't meet till we got down there. You know what I'm saying? So I would say table read is obviously very effective, very helpful, very important. But for me, I got a lot of that same table read. I got a lot of that from the auditions, the taped auditions.
You spoke a little bit about your location scouting earlier. I want to focus on Guatemala for a second. You mentioned in one of your promos on the Vimeo site, where we watched the video, at the bottom there's some extra content, and you mentioned that that was an expensive exercise. Do you feel that you had to go to Guatemala to shoot there? Wasn't it possible to get the same kind of feel or set somewhere else in the US? No, for a lot of reasons. One is, well, you cannot recreate the landscape of Guatemala City in America. You just can't. If you tried, you would be dealing with very small little areas, and it wouldn't be genuine. It wouldn't look genuine. The Guatemala part of small group is, I think, the strongest part in the film, and you cannot recreate. To even come close to recreating a lot of that, we would have spent so much in set design. They might as well buy the plane tickets. But also, it's just genuine. I like having actual little Guatemalan children running around playing soccer, rather than, in Georgia, we don't have a ton of Guatemalan immigrants. So I would have been, searching little, local Latino kids. Well, and they would have probably charged you a lot.
Well, I don't know about that, but little, like, there's a lot of, I guess, people from Mexican background in Georgia. They don't look the same as Guatemalan kids. They're not as Mayan.
So you wanted to get authenticity,
It has,
and
authenticity is a big, big,
so
big.
let me ask this: in terms of your script and your story, was it important for them to go on a mission trip to
Yes.
Guatemala?
Yes.
Couldn't they have gone somewhere else?
Okay, well, why Guatemala first? Well, let's talk about why missions first. Missions was important to me because I've been on a bunch of mission trips over the years, and for me, I had to give Coop an opportunity to really see Jesus live through someone.
Okay.
And he is in this, kind of a affluent suburban church. And it can be kind of difficult, I think, to have an opportunity that is so impactful in the day-to-day American soccer mom suburban life to really see Jesus live through someone. He had to be impacted. And for me, that's always, I've experienced that on mission trips. I've spent time in Kenya, I've spent time in the Caribbean, and other places. And for me, that's where it happened for me. That's where I see people really connecting with God, is when they're in a place where, in a destitute land where all they are doing is serving people who can't give them anything back. So that was important for me. I picked Guatemala because I had a friend a good friend who runs a ministry in Guatemala that Ingati Ministries in the film is a real ministry. Everything about that ministry is real. The missionary Sam, on which it's based, is basically Nathan, my friend. And so I had access through Nathan, not only to the physical part of the ministry, but to understand the culture. So that's the other thing, is that without involving an actual ministry and bringing him in, who could help me with being culturally real and authentic, I would have shot something totally different that would not have been as real and authentic. It would have been the best I can do. So I sent him the script, and he's like, we got to change everything. This wouldn't happen this way. This is not how the gangs work. This is not how motivations work. Little things like that, like when at the end, when the kid, there's one gang scene where a kid runs off with a weapon, and there's no more weapon on the scene, and all of a sudden, like, all these women run in and break up this potential fight. That to me is a beautiful little thing. I didn't know it would happen that way, but that's what my guy who's in ministry down there,
a cultural advisor,
he said the women are going to break that up as long as they see it's safe and nobody's going to get killed. Wow. A mom will get in a gangster's face and scream at him, and the gangster is not likely to do anything because there is a respect for moms down there. Wow. So that little element really added a lot for me, and there's a million of them that happened in Guatemala that I wouldn't have gotten trying to shoot. Now, let me back up here. That was a very controversial topic because you notice there's no name actors in this movie. I could have easily had a name actors in this movie if I'd gone SAG. The only reason, like, we were filling out the SAG is the Screen Actors Guild. We were filling out their paperwork. We paid everybody the modified SAG rates. We found a clause in there that says if you take one actor off of American soil to shoot, you're no longer eligible for the SAG modified rate. You got to pay the full SAG rate to everybody in the cast. And that wasn't possible. I couldn't pay everybody, $2,500 a day. Sure. So, or whatever it is. I could be wrong about that. So we had a choice to make. Do we try to shoot somewhere in Miami and pretend it's Puerto Rico? Which would be a cost, or do we just say no? The Guatemala is as important as any name we could get, and that's the decision we made. And that may have hurt us a little bit in the marketing for sure, because the distributor looks at us and goes, "There's no names in this movie." Our whole thing was, well, there's plenty of Christian movies that have done great with no names in them, and a lot of the Christian names you might get, they're not real box office draws. They're just names that people within the industry recognize, Right. So that was the decision we made. In terms of the marketing of the film, that might not have done us. We could have done better. I don't know. In terms of the quality of the film, we made absolutely the right decision to shoot in Guatemala. I won't write another movie that takes us overseas, but I'm glad we did it in this one.
Speaking about Guatemala, I thought about this question, and I'm very careful to ask it or say anything about this, but if I were to take your movie and I were to put it next to any of the Kendrick movies, the Kendrick movies are beautiful, they're good, but they're very polished and perfect. Your movie was very edgy, it was real, it was raw, and that's what I loved about your movie, especially when you brought Guatemala into it. That whole tension of those scenes there, that was real. It was kind of like the sword and the switchblade. That kind of tension that you brought in there, that gangsterism, etc. And there were a lot of controversial kind of actions that was taken, especially in that area. Yeah. And was that something that was important to you? Did you write it? Did it develop? Where did that come from?
A lot of that's just me. That's and what I want to see in a movie. It's got to be real for me. I buck against this problem we have in the Christian film marketplace that everything has to be so sanitized.
Yes.
It's just not real. It's not biblical. That sanitization is way more. It's a very legalistic, and I don't like it because it turns people away from Christianity for a dishonest reason. Now, I have nothing but wonderful things to say about the Kendrick brothers. You mentioned them specifically. Those guys are pioneers. They are trailblazers. That and Stephen Kendrick sat down with us and gave us so much of his time, and so I have nothing but great things to say about what they've done. I don't think it's unfair to point out some differences in kind of my style and theirs. So. You brought it up, and I'm going to go back to the Bible for the source of our differences. Okay. I contend that while we're all sinners in the eyes of God, I think there's biblical evidence, several places, that we all tend to sin in one of two different ways. We lean one way or the other. There is a lot of duality in man. And let's go to the story of the prodigal son for that. The story of the prodigal son is not just a lesson for the little brothers of the world who go out and get involved in the sins of the world and ignore the father. And the lesson is not just for them to know that the father will open his arms to me. The little brother learned his lesson. He did. But there was also a major lesson for the big brother in that story. The big brother did everything right. The big brother was upset that the little brother was let back in and given so much favor when he himself had been doing all the right things. And so the big brothers of the world tend to be much more, I think, legalistic. They tend to be more, focused on, I've got to do the right thing. And rah, rah, rah. They tend to be, I think, more pastors in this world, or big brother types who are going to, if they are going to sin, they're going to sin and lean the way of being overly judgmental. Not that we're not supposed to exercise judgment, but there is plenty of biblical evidence. You look at that story, but you also look at, and I bring this up in the movie, you look at Romans chapter 1 and 2. In chapter 1, Paul is talking directly to the little brothers of the world. Then in chapter 2, he turns it on them and says, those of you who think that, your stuff doesn't stink, it does. And so I feel like I'm definitely a little brother. There's no doubt, right? I grew up in a Baptist church. My mom was the secretary. We were as Baptist as a family gets, but I went off to college and went nuts. And the father was there with his open arms for me. I'm going to argue if Stephen Kendrick were here, I would say, Stephen, love you, brother, but you're a big brother. You guys came from the pastorate. You guys tell stories like pastors tell stories. And which are sermons. You're gonna preach a sermon. You're gonna put a story around it, and they do it well. They do it as good as anyone. Clearly, they're trailblazers. But myself, bless you. I didn't hear that, but I just saw it, so I can still say bless you. But I'm a little brother. I tend to believe that little brothers are gonna bring a lot more grit to their stories because it's part of their experience, and it's a valuable part of the experience. Big brothers look at moments in film with less nuance, right? I need to make a character bad, so I'm going to make them drink a glass of wine. Okay, whatever. Our guys in the movie were having a beer at a campfire. I'm always gonna probably tend more towards those type of sins, even though we all need to be brought back to the gospel in the middle. But I tend to think that little brothers tell more interesting stories. Not that my story is more interesting than theirs, because that's not the comparison. That's just, for me, that's what the difference is, and the way I approach things and the way I think others approach things, and why I'm so anti-sermon film and I'm so pro real raw story.
When you were speaking about the team, I picked up, because I wanted to deal with equipment, and I picked up, when you're building your team, kind of the equipment comes with those individuals and the people that they build and the companies that come on board. But in terms of equipment, just real quick, I want to just, for the indie filmmakers or someone that's going to do this, like you said, with their mobile phone, what are some of the key things that they're going to need? Is it the basic stuff? Like, I would assume you obviously have your cell phone, good sound, or just at least a lavalier mic that goes into it, or one of the mics that come above here, and decent lighting. What else do you think, if they want to make a really not low budget in quality, but they don't have a real big budget, what are some of the key things that they'll need?
Okay, you start off with two things: picture and sound. And sound is the easiest one to deal with. You can shoot a feature film and put it in a theater on an iPhone 11, and it would be pretty doggone good if you had great sound. Conversely, I've seen things shot on a Red or an Alexa with terrible sound, and they look cheap and terrible. So first and foremost, get good sound. Now, the way and whether you use a boom or a lav kind of depends. When you're doing narrative, I like a lav because it's there and you're getting the sound and you're not getting a lot of room in it, but you better be able to hide that sucker. And if you're doing narrative, you don't want to see a lav mic on somebody. When a narrative piece, it takes you, it doesn't suspend disbelief. And that can be hard to do without, a cheap little $20 lav is going to rub and sound terrible under your shirt. So that takes some doing and some research. Boom mics are good, but you better be close to your subject's mouth. If you're doing a wide shot, and there's 3 foot of headroom above your actor, and you've got your boom above that, you're going to hear the entire room, and it's terrible. So you got to. Now, when we shot on a feature film, we do both. Everybody's always got a lav on, hidden, and there's always a boom. The boom is going to give you bigger sound. It's going to give you, in the right environment, it's going to give you a much, much fuller spectrum. But it's going to also give you room. It's going to bounce around unless it's really close. So that's this audio mixer's job, is determine whether or not you want to go to the lav or whether you want to go to the boom. Sometimes you want a little more room. Sometimes you want it to feel a little more authentic. So, especially outside, when somebody's outside and they're across, in a long shot, and then you hear them perfectly. It just that can sometimes feel maybe less than authentic as if you had a boom hidden or something. So, but the sound is most important. You get good sound. In terms of your picture, lighting is everything, and it's very simple for lighting. You want ample, even light. Okay, ample, enough of it, and even. Well, I say even. That's more in videography, but you want to make sure that if you're shooting outside, it can be difficult, because if the sun's coming from, say, this light source right here, sun's coming from here, and this side of your face is hot, and you don't have any reflectors over here, so this is all dark because you have a camera that doesn't have a lot of dynamic range or contrast latitude. Then what you have to do, even in film. If I shot outside, we didn't shoot a lot in full sun. We would put a 20 by 20 diffuser over the scene so that it diffused the light. If you're shooting outside is great on overcast days. A lot of people think that a nice, beautiful sunny day is great because it gives us that blue sky and lots more color. But the light, even for film cameras, tends to be a little too from a direct source, and then you gotta You got to set up diffusion, which is a whole nother ball of wax. So go out shoot on a nice overcast day, and you get perfect light. If you're inside, you want to make sure there's enough light. And I always say use as much natural light as you can. When you buy these cheap studio kits, with CFL bulbs and stuff, and try to start using those as cinematic lighting for storytelling, it can look very lit very easily. Like my little setup in here, I've got some cheap little studio lights and a ring light up there. And it looks very lit. This doesn't look like natural. It looks great for a podcast. This would not be a good environment for storytelling. So you want to light for the reason, but there's so many videos and things about how you can learn how to optimize for picture and sound based on what you have, even if what you have is almost nothing.
Can you, when you spoke about the actors and the team, etc., you also dealt a little bit with the actual shooting. We spoke about it now. So let's move on to post-production.
Yeah.
Can you just share an overview of what that process is like in what happens in post-production?
Okay, so post-production, you start off with editing. And so what we did is we actually, I didn't want to go to Atlanta every day because it's a 2-hour drive. So we brought an editor in from Atlanta, and we bought all the computer we needed. And he stayed actually at this very house I'm at right now. He lived here 5 days a week, and we set up in the living room, and me and the producer would sit behind him, and he would cut. And so he cuts together. So he spends about a week, doing all the syncing and all that technical stuff, and then starts cutting together scenes. And we just go through scene by scene like we did in the script, and just comb through scene by scene by scene by scene, and just I don't like that. I don't know. Let's remember change that. A frame here, a frame there. So it's a very tedious process to get all the editing down to where you want it. So that took probably 2-3 months to actually get us down to a raw cut. And he's using this is not the finished cut. We're just doing a first pass cut. So we did a first pass cut, put a lot of temporary music in there, temporary color. It's not a beautiful picture at this point because it's not supposed to be. And then we get to what's called that initial cut. And then we took that initial cut out and we screened it for different audiences. And just to see what their reaction was, gave them a 5-page survey as to what worked for them and what didn't. And were there things that one person would say that just lit a light bulb over our head, or were there common themes that popped up that we felt needed to be addressed? And there were. We actually, this was 9 months after we wrapped production, we got to a point where we knew there were 5 or 6 major things that were breaking the film completely. And so we scheduled a whole nother weekend of reshoots, and we added a couple scenes, and we completely reshot a couple scenes. And that really helped the movie, because there were times when the movie just crashed because of a scene was wrong, or the lighting was terrible, or something happened at that point. The acting was not where it needed to be, or there's one scene in particular. I don't want to go into it and ruin it, but there's a scene that depicts grief. I'll just say that. That scene. That wasn't in the original cut. We watched it, and several females said, I never got her grief. All of a sudden, she's here and she's here. And so I had to go in and get an idea of what can we do. And so that's an idea that I think was given to me that was I think people, especially women who have gone through what this character goes through, they come and they hug me and they say, I needed to see that. Wow. That's what we go through. I don't want to give that away. So anyway, we did reshoots, edit that back in. And then when we're finally at what's called picture lock, where we're like, okay, we're not changing anything else about the editorial cut of this film. That's when we take it to a post-production house and do all the more complicated things, the technical things. You go into the 2 main things are sound design and color. So we did color first.
Can you explain sound design, because that is where you need accentuation on certain ticks or the cracks or something, or someone walking on the pavement.
You got to have an audio engineer, and his job is to handle everything with regards to sound. He's got to pick which mic are we using for every bit of dialogue. How do they blend together? What sound effects are we able to kind of put underneath them to blend them together? Everything about sound. He's also mixing in all the music and the score, fixing little problems. There was one whole scene. There's a scene where Deke gives this speech out underneath the stars. And if you remember that scene, that entire scene in Georgia, we have this bug called cicadas. They're very, very, very loud. And there's nothing you can do about cicadas during the summer. We thought we'll get it out in post, and we couldn't get them out. They were so loud. So we had to bring him in and literally ADR, meaning re-record every line in that scene is him in a studio. So there's you gotta make all the audio choices, all the audio edits, all the audio, all the mixing, the levels, the music. So all that has to happen, and that took several weeks. And then there's also color grading. Color grading is a big deal because you shoot in a flat color profile. When you see the footage that's shot, it looks very flat and gray, almost no color at all, because it's shot in, again, a flat color profile. The colorist pulls everything out, so we have to sit and watch the colorist do his job and make suggestions here and there. And I don't know if that's just so. That was about a month and a half or so where we're driving to Atlanta every day in and out of traffic and sitting with these professionals and getting the movie put together. So then when all that's done, that's when all the color is done and the sound design is done and we're ready to lock it off. Boom! That's when you're done fixing your movie. That's when it.
So there's no final mix. That's like that. Those are the processes.
Well, I mean that you do have a final. The final mix is all part of that. But no, okay. once you're in sound design and final mix, audio mix and color, there's no more editing. Editing is done. You're at picture lock. So okay. So then you do all those things, and also within that would be special effects and graphics and credits and then creating all the deliverables, all the different kinds of files that are needed for the various different distribution outlets. So
what did you guys do for soundtrack for the music? What did you have someone write it specifically for you? Did you go and source stock? What did you guys do?
So we did a couple different things. We had the lady who plays Mary in the movie, her husband is a brilliant songwriter. So there are a handful, 5 or 6 original songs that he wrote for the movie that just really, 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 really made the movie for me. Including that grieving scene. That's him. That's his song. Including the very first song in the title track, "Lord Take Me Back." I just told him, I said, this is kind of a story of a prodigal son story. So give me a prodigal son song that would go well with a trip across the country. And he wrote this brilliant song, "Lord Take Me Back." He's actually from Northern Ireland, so we got a cool international kind of a perspective there. And then I hired the temp track, the very first track, I kind of scored with stock music, which worked to an extent, but you just can't beat original score. So once we had all the temp track done and the picture lock done, then we sent the and kind of this is part of the process too. I think this is before sound design. We send the whole movie to a composer, and the composer starts composing original music for. The composition is different than original songs, right? Composition is just your music beds, basically. So yeah, we had a brilliant original composer who I think did a fantastic job of kind of really weaving the whole thing together.
Finally, I think let's talk about marketing. I only saw 2 trailers online. Did you do any more of that? And who does the trailers? In terms of trailers, there's. I've seen a movie. It's a very old movie. I can't remember what it is, but I think Jack Black and someone else plays in that movie. And Jack Black is actually the person. No, the lady is actually the one that cuts the trailers together. What did you guys do in terms of choosing what should be in the trailer? And because that is another process altogether, because you got to tell a story, but just enough to get people's attention and interest that they want to see the rest.
Yeah, that's one thing that I wanted nothing to do with, cutting a trailer, because I just felt like my view of it was too myopic. And so we hired a trailer cutter, a guy who just does that for Hollywood movies. And our first trailer, I don't know which one you saw, but our first trailer for the theatrical mix, I thought it was a very good trailer. And we used that for 2 years. But then when we used it for the theatrical cut, but then when we got our distributor brought in a brilliant marketing guy this guy handles everything from graphic design to social media marketing to trailer cutting. And he tested our trailer, just putting it out there and for direct response. Yeah, he tested it to see does the trailer sell this product? And what he found out was through the comments we were seeing and the where the ROI was, he found out that the original trailer there was some skepticism from a lot of people, from a lot of the typical faith film buying audience as to the credibility, the faith credibility of this movie, right? Is this really a Christian movie? Are they making fun of Christians? All that kind of defensiveness. That's a real thing, and it's a problem. So he cut a new trailer that he felt was probably one you saw, that he felt did a little better job of making it feel like more of a faith film. I want the experience of the film to make it feel like, like I said, like it's a little outside of what you're normally used to, while still obviously reflecting the gospel. But his whole thing was, no, I want the trailer of this movie to make it feel like a faith film, because we are going after the people in terms of our bedrock of our customer base. We got to go after people who buy faith films. And so he cut a version that did a little more of that. And then he cut another version because he said, I still feel like there's a lot of skepticism out there. People are going, what's this movie about? Is it really Christian? How dare they make fun of Christians? Which I think is just such an unfortunate thing, that a lot of Christians, especially too large a portion of the faith film market, is looking for that sermon film. They take themselves so seriously that they can't say it's okay for us to laugh at ourselves a little bit, at our culture. Yeah. We're not making fun of God. I got that comment. You're making fun of God. How? No, I'm not. I'm making fun of stupid people being stupid, and we are. We're dumb and goofy, and it's okay. So anyway, so we've got to cut trailers to kind of respond to the audiences that we're going after. So that's where those two trailers came from. You can't cut a million trailers, because then it's really hard to see what's working and what's not. You want to be very focused on what's working.
Landing this interview, are you guys still busy with marketing and sales of the movie, or are you busy working on something else? What's next?
Well, both. The marketing team, I kind of help where I can, but the marketing team is busy doing that. It's all about how much advertising money do we put behind the thing, and can we put enough of that to get more than that back in sales? That's a simple game. It is now.
Do you know how much you grossed so far?
I don't. I'm sure it's on a spreadsheet somewhere. All I know is tens of thousands of people have seen this movie so far, and our numbers going up and up and up. I did chart the number of Amazon reviews the other day, and that chart is doing this. It's going upward. In fact, it's starting to lean this way a little bit, which is really, really, really good. Does that directly correlate to sales? No, but so there's so many different factors. Fourth quarter was very difficult, but because you're competing for audiences. There's the term called CPM, cost per thousand. What does it cost to reach 1,000 people? That number was astronomically high before the election, because all the politicians were buying up the ad revenue. And then as soon as the election's over, all of the online marketers are buying it all up for Christmas. So as soon as that ended, boom, the CPMs dropped. So then we started, having higher returns on investments. Wow. So yeah, they're doing all that stuff. My job right now is I'm kind of trying to figure out what's next and what's the next opportunities. Like I said, I'm writing for this show Vindication. Hoping to fly down to Dallas to kind of visit that set here next month. I've written a pilot that I'm pitching for a series, and then I've got 2 or 3 different features that I've got kind of in development right now that I just have to see which one I believe God is leading me towards in terms of what we can get made and what can have the impact. So yeah, I'm hoping to just this year really ramp up. Now that I have the marketing and all this stuff behind me, and it's in God's hands now. I'm really looking forward to ramping up my own creative efforts this year and see where it goes.
Awesome. Matt, you know what? This was a very exciting interview for me. I've done a lot of different interviews, and lately I just came across incredible people like you, and thank you for being open to have an interview with me. And I think, my audience, we want to teach them how to different ways of communicating. Yeah. And I think through movies like this is a great way to do that. I want to thank you for your time, and thank you for spending time with me today. And if there's anything that I can do for you or I can help you with or anything at all, please let me know. Absolutely. But I bless you and thank you so much for being on this interview today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been fun. I like long form like this. This is great. I will say that in case your audience would like to see small group, maybe we should send them to where they can see it.
Definitely.
So it will be available on iTunes in South Africa. That's in progress. But you can go to smallgroupmovie.com and stream from the website. So you pull it up on your laptop, throw that on your TV, smallgroupmovie.com, and you can check it out.
Awesome. So definitely go and do that. I enjoyed it a lot. I love the realness and authenticity of it. And obviously here we spoke about the process and so on. But thank you very much, Matt. And you should enjoy your weekend.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Awesome.
Take care.